everyone, I'm Allie with PotomacBeads. In this Better Beader episode, we are going to go over the question that gets asked a fair amount about wire and different gauges of wire, whether or not when you're making an eye pin, do you need to coil the wire around the eye pin? So I'm going to show you how to do an eye pin, what I mean by coiling it versus not coiling it, and go over the gauges of wire that I recommend to coil for the uses that you are going to be doing. Whether or not you're making earrings, bracelet, necklaces, anklets, those opinions and that advice may change depending on the type of jewelry. We're going to touch on all of that and more in this Better Beader episode. So the first thing that I want to touch on, and I have other Better Beader episodes on wire and the different gauges, so make sure to check that out as well, is the difference in the gauges of wire. So we have the new Potomax wire here, and we have everything, it goes down to 26, 28 gauge, but I have the most common sizes here: 24, 22, 20, and 18, and then 16 to show you for comparison. The different gauges of wire are going to go up in number as the wire gets thinner. So the necklace I have here that you'll see tomorrow is going to be made with 24 gauge wire. If you're making a cuff or a bangle, or you're doing a frame here like this little cute design that Melissa did, you are going to be using 18 gauge and even sometimes going into that 16 gauge wire. When we're talking about an eye pin, we are talking about a loop that usually is coming out of a bead to connect one bead to another, like the necklace that I'm currently wearing, the Hawaiian Tropics. If you are using thin gauges, like the 24 gauge wire or the 22 gauge wire, you're going to make sure to always coil your eye pins. You always want to do that little coiled wrap around the loop. I'm going to demo with the thicker wire exactly what that's going to look like. That way you get an idea. And also my opinion of whether or not to coil the wire is going to change again for what uses we are going to be seeing and using the different gauges for. So I have the 24 gauge wire here, and just right off the spool, I'm going to show you what I mean by an eye pin. Again, Better Beader episodes are on this, as well as, wait for it, tomorrow's video, or Monday's video rather. This is going to be an eye pin. It's a loop that is made by your round nose pliers to get that nice rounded design. If you have a thin gauge like this, and you're doing it for anything more than ear wires, that loop can easily pull out as you pull and have tension on the jewelry. When it comes to 24 gauge, no matter what style of jewelry that I'm making, necklace, bracelets, earrings, or anklets, I'm always going to take the extra wire that's around the eye pin here and coil it around itself. This makes it nice and secure that you're not going to have this coil open up. This also stands true in my book for 22 gauge wire. Now you may have some head pins or ear wires that are going to be 22 gauge. In that case, because they don't get as much wear and tear, I'm iffy on whether or not I coil. When in doubt, coil and do that extra little coiling action. When you're not coiling, you are going to lead to and see just that open loop. That open loop is called your eye pin. The extra wire that we did at the beginning, that is your coiled eye pin. So if you have your eye pin here, and you have the little scarf around what I call my man's neck, that's a coiled eye pin, versus no scarf, that's just an eye pin. Sometimes eye pins, you can buy them already pre-manufactured. Honestly, I think they're kind of a waste. I would make your own. When it comes to 24 gauge as well as 22 gauge, my line and course of thought is always, always coil. Especially if you're doing something that's going to get a lot of wear and tear. That 24 gauge, again, like this Hawaiian Tropics, having more of that dangle down, all of these little coiled loops, that's going to get you that design that you want with the security of holding it all together. Used in a design like this, where Melissa has the wire, that 24 gauge, wrapped around a thicker base, that 24 gauge you can see as well is wrapped and coiled around the exterior, around the base. At the top here, the 18 gauge on this little charm is not coiled because it's stiff enough to hold its shape. When you get into gauges higher than 24 and 22, it becomes a question of what are you using the wire for. If you're using the 20 gauge wire for a nice simple project and you're making that eye pin here at the end, rolling it out, bending it back out straight, this wire is fairly stiff. It's going to take a fair amount of pressure and tension for this loop to open up. However, in this design here, like this anklet, if you want to go ahead and make extra bead caps with extra wire, as well as have it be nice and stiff and durable, like Kenzie made here, you're always going to want to coil. So for when it comes to a 20 gauge for necklaces or rosary designs, you can keep those loops open without doing the extra little coil like I'm going to show. So there's my loop that I've made. So here's my eye pin on the end. Here's the look of the coiled eye pin. You can see how much different in gauge and size the 20 is versus that 24 gauge wire. No coil with a coil. 20 gauge, I am fine keeping it in a chain link style as a necklace without coiling. As earrings and hanging down without coiling. When it comes to an anklet, because it's going to get a lot of wear and tear, it's on your foot, I would go ahead and even coil the 20 gauge wire. When it comes to the look of it, that also sometimes is going to depend on whether or not you do the coil. When it comes to 18 gauge wire, going even thicker, usually I just do a plain uncoiled eye pin. This is going to be thick enough to hold its shape, durable enough that you can hammer it down if you need to, and really just keep a nice form and figure. This is used a lot, the 18 gauge, for bangle bracelets, and you'll be able to wrap around those and they will keep their form. You can even use them for bracelets in the figure 8 here, wrapping and coiling. You can see the thinner wire to get it stay in its place. And then even thicker 16. 16 gauge wire is going to be fine to do just the plain eye pin. You can always as well do the 18 gauge and the 16 gauge as a coiled eye pin. It's just going to look a little bigger because the wire is thicker. So when you're talking about to coil or not to coil, that is the question. 24 gauge, in my book, always coil. 22 gauge, unless it's just for a simple drop earring or as a part of a head pin, always coil. 20 gauge, when you're talking about that. And again, anything lower than 24, definitely coil. When you're talking about 26 gauge, for anything other than a necklace or a pair of hanging earrings. For bracelets, I tend to coil. For anklets, definitely coil. It's going to make it a lot more secure. So when you get two eye pins that are open right next to one another, so here we have our coiled eye pins. Here we have one eye pin and another eye pin. When these tend to get next to each other, there is a chance that they will open as you link them together. This is why I say for necklaces, rosary style, it's fine to have them uncoiled. However, if you are doing a bracelet, something that gets bumped, or an anklet, go ahead and coil that up. Once you get into the thicker gauges, it's really just coiling for a matter of look and for your preference. Hopefully this answers questions that you have about the different gauges and whether or not to coil or not coil when you're doing your chain link design. You can also make sure to comment below so that way you help out other beaders that may be practicing and playing with wire for the first time or working with it and trying to decide, do I need to coil, do I not need to coil, how is this going to stay and how stiff it is. Use your common sense. You can make an eye pin like I did, pull on it a little bit and see for your use of jewelry whether or not to coil or not coil. But when in doubt, coil that wire. As always, thanks so much for watching this Better Beader episode. I love getting back to wire, answering wire questions, and teaching wire. So I'm looking forward to you seeing the Hawaiian Tropics necklace on Monday as well. Remember that you can always give feedback and comment below in the video. You can also check out the descriptions to shop with us online for any of the things that you may be looking to get, as well as links to some of those coiled eye pin videos in case you need a little help on that. Remember, if you haven't yet, subscribe so you don't miss anything from us here at Potomac Beads, as well as give a little thumbs up and show your beautiful wire working and coiling projects in our Facebook group for beading and jewelry making. The Better Beader episodes are designed to make you more informed and better at your craft, and hopefully this Better Beader episode will help along that way. Thanks so much for watching, and happy beading, everyone.